saw basically the hierarchical aspect. That is, at the top, we have a tenant. Now, one tenant can host multiple Azure subscriptions. Similar to how we had seen, correct? In the YLDF7 tenant, I had 2 subscriptions. So the relationship between a tenant to a subscription is 1:many. 1:many cardinalities. Correct? So now let's forget about these other aspects for today. And now let's focus on at a subscription level. Now, within a subscription, the next hierarchy is basically, rather than fabric capacity, imagine something called as a resource group. So Azure subscription is like your logical container for the organization for Azure offerings. Correct. Now within that, I want to bifurcate that container for different set of developmental aspects. Correct. So within a subscription, I can create multiple resource groups. As the name suggests, it's grouping different set of similar use case resources into one aspect. That's what we call as a resource group. So one Azure subscription can have multiple resource groups. What do I mean by that? Now, under this, search for something called as resource group. So the highest hierarchy is tenant. Within the tenant, you have, so the highest hierarchy becomes the tenant. Within the tenant, you can have multiple subscriptions. As you can see here, I can have 2 or more subscriptions, 1 or more subscriptions. Now within one subscription, I can have multiple resource groups. Search for resource groups. Now, here I can filter in which subscription do I want to create the resource group. As you all have only one subscription, for you all there is no need of filtering. But for me, since I have 2, I'll filter it on Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. So as you all can see that within one tenant, within one subscription, I am having multiple resource groups. How to create a resource group? I can click on create. Here I can select the drop down where in which subscription I want to create. In case if I have multiple subscriptions, I can provide a resource group name. So here I can provide a resource group name, and then I can provide the region of the corresponding resource group which I want to create. So now I can select in the region where I want to create the corresponding resource group. I can create, there is no, even though my tenant, let's say, is in Singapore or the Southeast Asia, it need not necessarily mean that I can only create a resource group in the corresponding region itself. I can create a resource group in any region of the choice that Microsoft provides. So in this case, I'll proceed with North Europe or Central US. Let's go with Central US. Now, while creating a resource group, there are concepts called as tags. Here, I can create some tags. Tags, remember this concept, because similar to how we create tags in Azure portal, similarly, there is a concept of tags in Fabric. As the name suggests, it's like I'm providing certain tags to this resource group for data governance and some automation purposes. Imagine that I want to create this resource group for some sensitive data aspect. So I can mark a tag as sensitive, data, etc. So tags, as the name suggests, are certain tags that you will provide to a resource group or components for some data governance or metadata driven purposes. And that metadata in itself helps for better data management and automation use cases. For now, there is no need for me to create any tags. I'll go and create this resource group. So now a resource group got created. Let me refresh this. Okay. In which subscription? It was Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. Correct. Deleted. The resource group got created. Now this resource group is empty. Can you see, as of now, there are no tags. I can add tags that I want, wherein I can create a tag like tag name as data sensitivity, and I can add a corresponding value as confidential. I can add the owner. Who is the owner of this resource group? I can add data sharks and I can save it. So now imagine that as I said, one subscription can have multiple resource groups. I want to identify the list of resource groups that contains sensitive data. One way is I have to manually go across every resource group and search across any sensitive data content. Or while creation of the group itself, I can create a tag with respect to such aspects that can help in easier identification of the resource groups. So this is what we call as tags.
How many tags we can have, Nandan, for resource group?
As of now, I don't remember the exact
No, but it is
limitation.
more than one, right? More than one, right?
Yes, we created more than one, correct? Data sensitivity owner.
Yeah. Okay.
There is some upper limit with respect to, I don't remember. It's above 100 something. I don't remember the exact.
Okay.
But you can create multiple tags depending. See, every organization might have different set of KPIs that they want to analyze, correct? It can be data sensitivity, it can be ownership, it can be cost aspect, etc. So depending on the KPIs that one wants to automate, one can create different set of tags. Clear? Now, yes. I created a resource group. Let's again go across the hierarchy. Correct? First is we create something. First is a tenant. Within a tenant, I can have multiple subscriptions. Within a subscription, I can have multiple resource groups. Resource groups are like logical grouping of your project. Imagine that I am working on project 1. Correct? You all are working on project 2. So corresponding to every project, I can create a separate resource group. So the resource group is like a logical grouping based on different use cases and scenarios. Now, within a resource group, I can create multiple Azure offerings. Meaning, I can go and create a data factory. You can ignore what data factory is as of now. I'll explain that in the subsequent aspect. But for now, let's just go with the flow that there is a Azure offering called Azure Data Factory. And as the name suggests here, it's a hybrid data integration description that simplifies ETL at scale. So it's a data integration and a transformation tool that I'll be creating. So let me create this here. Now I have to provide a name. Let's say demo delete. Now here I have to select a region. I created the resource group in Central US. So would the components that are getting created within the resource group be limited to that region itself? Team, let's be interactive.
No.
Can you repeat, Nandan, what was your question?
The question was, I created a resource. While creating a resource group, I had to select a region in which the resource group needs to be created. Agree?
Yes.
So now, when I'm creating a component within that resource group, would that component be restricted to that region itself in which the resource group was created? Meaning, the resource group was created in central US. So the data factory that I'm creating within that resource group, correct? Would that be limited to the central US itself, or can I create it in any region?
Any here it is giving an option to select another region. So I think technically it's possible, but ideally it should be within the same resource group.
Others,
Yeah,
any
I
other
think it's in the same resource group. So
it should inherit, correct?
yeah.
But
So
then
who
why
all
it is giving an option, Nandan? If it has to inherit, then why it is giving an option to create the region?
who all feel that
Select
it
a
is,
region.
who all feel that it would inherit and we cannot change the region of the individual components within that resource group? Can you all raise your hands?
We can change region, but
Okay. So some of them feel that you cannot change and some of them feel that you can change. The answer to that is the resource group region is not inherited and it does not restrict the components that are getting created within the corresponding resource group. You can create the corresponding aspect in any other region as well. So let me go ahead and create in central India. So now, as you can see, correct, tags can be created at an resource group level and tags can also be created at an individual resource level as well. It depends on what automation or what KPI does the organization want for their aspect. Accordingly, the corresponding tags can be created. So in this scenario, I had the resource group in central US, but I created the Azure Data Factory in India. Parallelly, when this is getting created, let me go to the deleted resource group. Since the resource has yet not been created, it is showing that the resource group is empty as of now. Correct? The ADF got created. So let me refresh it. So now I can see that the ADF got created, but the ADF is in central India. Now let's say that I want to create another resource. Now would that resource be restricted to central US or central India, or can I have the benefit of creating it in any other region as well?
You can create any other region.
Correct. So now let me go ahead and create. So the ADF that we created, you all can ignore. But after today's session, there was already one case study for you all, correct? That is, you all had to create 2 users with the corresponding scenarios that I had provided and test out by logging in so that you understand the difference between Azure role assignment and Active Directory role assignments. Now, post that, create a resource group with proper naming conventions. Do not keep it like deleted. I want to clean this resource group post my call, hence I map it as to be deleted. Provide proper names, and then you need to create 3 components that I'll be showing now. First component that you need to create is something called as storage account. So search for storage account. When you search for storage account, you would see something called as a storage account here. Click on create. In Azure, there are 2 storage aspects called Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Correct? See team, this is not a what I'll say Azure bootcamp. But unfortunately, for understanding Microsoft Fabric's architectural designing and everything, you need to understand Azure, because Microsoft Fabric is hosted on Azure itself. So first create a storage account. In that storage account, provide a storage account name. Now, see, that is to be unique. Delete storage account name demo. Now, I can create it in any region. Correct. So now let me create it in Europe, or let's say Poland Central. Now, the primary service is Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage that we want. So I'll select Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. For minimal cost preservation, we'll keep the performance as standard. We do not want a premium storage account, since this is a developmental environment that we will be using. And redundancy, will keep it as locally redundant. Then next, here let the properties be as is. Here you all can see, correct, hierarchical namespace. In the primary service that we created, correct, here Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 we have selected. It's either Azure Blob or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Now, in case if I enable this property, that is enable hierarchical namespace, then it would convert the storage account as an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. But if I do not enable this account, it would create this as an Azure Blob Storage. That's the difference. Now, what is the difference between Azure Blob Storage and Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2? That we will discuss tomorrow. Today, the focus is on understanding the hierarchical aspect of Azure subscription, resource groups, and having your prerequisites ready to deep dive into Microsoft Fabric. So, you all need to create 2 storage accounts. One storage account you would create by disabling this property. One storage account you would create by enabling this property, because then one would be a storage account, blob storage, another would be an Azure Data Lake Storage. And then we would understand tomorrow the difference between an Azure Blob Storage and Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. So the action is create 2 different storage accounts. In one, you enable this, in one, you keep it as is. Now, this networking aspect, I won't discuss as of today. This might confuse you all a bit. This would be enable public access from all network. Let this be enabled by default. Then click on review and create. So the action is you all need to create 2 storage accounts, one with enable hierarchical namespace enabled and another with enable hierarchical namespace disabled. And create it. So now we saw that I can create multiple resources within a resource group. So the hierarchy is one tenant. One tenant can have multiple subscriptions. One subscription can have multiple resource groups. One resource group can have multiple offerings created within it. Any confusion within the hierarchy up till now? I'll take it as a no. So one aspect that we saw is I can create the Azure resource group and the components across different set of regions. There is no inheritance or limitation or restriction. If that is the case, then why the hell does resource group have a region associated with that? Now, in case of the storage account is the storage layer. If I'm creating a storage account in India, it means the data that I'm dumping within the storage account is getting hosted within a data center that is present in India. correct? Because these are physical components. Resource group is a logical component. It's a logical layer to enclose all the physical offerings of similar aspect together. So I can understand having the physical components associated with a specific region. But what is the significance of having a region associated to the logical container, that is the resource group? Can anyone state?
Yes, saving the data in that particular regional servers.
No, Anamika, correct. When you say server, correct, it means you have physically created a server, like the storage account that we created, correct? The storage account is present in Poland Central. So any data that I'm uploading within the storage account, let me take an example, correct here. Let me go to the storage account. Okay, I won't confuse you. For the understanding purpose, I upload some data into the storage account. Since the storage account is hosted in Poland Central, the data would reside in the Poland Central. My question is, if that is the case, what is the benefit of or use of having a region associated at a resource group level? That is a logical container, not a physical container similar to this.
Data latency, you mean?
Data retention is part of the storage account. It is in Poland, correct? Imagine I have another storage account created in, let's say, China. Within this resource group, I have two storage accounts, one storage account in Poland Central, another in China. So the data for the corresponding storage accounts would be presided within the corresponding geos, that is Poland Central and China. So the data is being hosted across the location in which the corresponding object was created. Then what is the benefit of having a location associated to a region? That is my question.
In case of any failure happen in any of the region, so for recovery purpose or like that?
No, imagine that I had I am having three different geos, correct? If the issue is happening in Poland Central, it would be this component that would be impacted. Other components would function as is, correct? Because it's the physical offerings that would have issue with the geo. But resource group is a logical container, correct? So
then if one application is communicating to the other application, right? If they are in the same location or same geographical area, right? So the communication would be easy, right? There would be latency very less.
correct. So that is the next point that I'll discuss, the best standards, etc. My question is not that as of now. My question is, it's these components that are actually getting impacted with the geo, not the resource group. Resource group is just a logical container, correct? So then what is the significance of having a geo location associated with a resource group? Isn't this a redundant property? That's my question.
Purpose?
Sorry?
For governance purpose? Like
somewhat correct.
So it can, I think, store a copy of data into this, no?
Administrative side?
No. See, remember, data copy is a very difficult terminology to use. In today's world, there are multiple rules and regulations with respect to the data storage and its corresponding location. So in case data, if you are saying data is getting duplicated, most of the organization would be under loss, considering some of the impact that would have. So it's not data is getting duplicated.
Okay.
At a resource group level, data does get duplicated at a object level. If you saw while creating the resource group, you had a property, correct? Redundancy. Correct? Redundancy meaning, okay, so you all made me get involved into Azure. Okay, I'll explain. Imagine that I have a storage account, correct? In India. So in India, what happens is there is a data center. Within that data center, okay, let's take an example, correct? In India, in Karnataka, there are three different data centers. Let's say in Bangalore, in Mangalore, and in Udupi. Now, within when I selected the region India, within Karnataka, it would allocate me any one location, let's say Bangalore. Now, within Bangalore office in the data center, within one rack, within one server, within one rack, it would give me one access. Now, imagine that if rack caught fire, and if my data is present only in that rack, my data would get deleted. Correct? Hence, there is a concept of locally redundant, meaning within that same rack, within that same server, there will be multiple racks. Correct? So my data would be spread across rack, would be present across rack 1 and would be present across rack 2. So in case if rack 1 got fire, rack 2 does have the data. But imagine that if the entire Bangalore server caught that fire, then comes the concept of zone redundancy. Within Bangalore, there would be 3 different servers. So I'll keep that data from in server 1 and server 2 rather than within the same racks, within the same server. So even if my server 1 caught fire, server 2 is still secure. So my data is still present in server 2. Now imagine entire Bangalore location got fire. Then comes local region pair. That is, which is the nearest region that is for Bangalore. It's either Udupi or Mangalore, since those are within Karnataka itself. So rather than having my data present across 2 servers within the same Bangalore location, I'll have it in a geo-redundant in a geo-replica pair. For North Europe, it is West Europe. Central US, East US. There is a geo pair associated. So consider that I have one data in one server in Bangalore and one in Mangalore. But imagine if entire Karnataka is shut down or some natural calamity happens. My entire data is lost. Then comes the concept of geo-redundancy. I'll have one data in Karnataka and one data in, let's say, Delhi or in China or US, because these are geo-redundant pair. Meaning, even if something happens in Karnataka, the chances of that happening in US parallel is very difficult, very rare. Unless it's a very big natural calamity wherein every city, world war, etc., everyone is impacted, no one would be then interested in where data is. Everyone would be interested in saving their own life. That is what we call as geo-redundant pair. So, for disaster recovery purposes, the geo-redundancy is set up at an object level when we are creating the offering. It's not at a resource group level. Every component that is hosting the data does have a geo-redundancy aspect. Since Azure Data Factory is not a storage layer, it's a ETL tool. It does not physically host any data. Hence, you didn't get that option of geo-redundancy. But since the storage account preserves the data, there was an option of the geo-redundancy that we all saw. I hope you understood that geo-redundancy is at an object level and not at a resource group level. And what are the types of replicas that you all can create? That was the most layman terminology that I could understand. But ideally, Karnataka, Bangalore, etc., those are just examples. There are no actual data centers there. I hope you all understood the significance of having a backup and geo concept. So now again back to the question. If disaster recovery, if data storage, etc., is at the object level, then why does a resource group have a location property enabled?
As an admin, work. It can work as an admin to just check.
No. Basically, this resource group has certain metadata, correct? Like metadata of the storage account, meaning this resource group has multiple components, correct? So the metadata of this is preserved in this location. A resource group is a logical container, but that logical container needs to have some metadata, correct, of what components it is, etc. So to preserve that metadata, you need some location, correct? Data needs to be present in some physical location in the data center. So that location of preserving the metadata and the compliance aspect is the geo of the corresponding resource group. So it is preserving the metadata, not the data.
For each
Clear?
component, right? For each
Sorry.
component, right?
Sorry, I didn't get hear you.
I said
Not
for
only
each
component. At resource group level, you are providing certain access and other aspects, correct? If you see, there are some other properties at a resource group level, correct? So it's for preserving the metadata of the entire resource group, of the entire container. It can be what all objects are within the container, what properties are within that container, etc.
yeah, got it.
Clear? I hope this concept is clear as to what is the significance of this location. Okay. So moving on. So one action for you all is create a resource group, create two storage accounts, one with enable hierarchy namespace enabled and one with disabled, so that it creates a blob account and an Azure Data Lake storage Gen2. Post that, create something called as an Azure Key Vault. So search for Azure Key Vault. In the Key Vault, click on Create Key Vault. Then provide the Key Vault name. Then the region. Now, one aspect is ideally, as a best standards, you should have all your components created in the similar region. Why? Imagine that if your storage account is in region X, your data factory is in region Y. So just to pull that data, there might be some latency involved and an additional cost involved called ingress and egress. Meaning every time my data factory has to go to this region, pull data from this region and come back here. So there is cross-region data transferring that is happening, which in turn increases the cost and the latency. Hence, ideally, as a best standard, it is always preferred that you create your resource group and all the components within that resource group in the same geo, in the same location. So in this case, assuming that my resource group is in central US, create the key vault in central US. Keep the pricing tier as standard, the bare minimal. Then click select vault access policy for now. Don't select Azure role-based access. I'll explain Azure role-based access tomorrow. Then automatically this user would get added, meaning the user via which you have logged in. Networking is all network and click review and create. In case if you all have any queries post this call, you can Google on how to create an Azure Key Vault as well. Now what Azure Key Vault is, what storage account is, etc. we'll deep dive tomorrow. So today, work on creating a resource group, creating two user accounts, create three components within that resource group, an Azure Key Vault, two storage accounts. Now, as I said, one subscription can have multiple resource groups. We give access at a subscription level. but we can also give access at a resource group level. Imagine that not everyone should have access on the subscription, correct? Because subscription is the parent. Imagine I created a resource group for a development team. I need to grant them access only at that corresponding resource group level. There is no need for me to give them access at a subscription level. So for that, you have to go to the resource group. For the second user whom we didn't grant any Azure subscription role, go to access control IAM. Similar to how we had access control IAM at a subscription level, we have at a resource group level. We also have it at a object level. Meaning, in case if I go to the storage account, I have access control even at a storage account. Meaning, I can grant an access at a subscription level, at a resource group level, or at an individual offering level. That is how I can control the access aspect for a resource. But for the second user that we had created, just granting him or her the global administrator role, go to access control IAM, and within that we can add him a role assignment. And that role assignment would be a privileged role of owner, and follow the similar process of member, then the condition that we had seen, etc. Now, in Azure subscription, there are three main roles that you need to be aware of. One is an owner role, another is a contributor role, third is a reader role. Reader is the bare minimal role wherein in case if you assign anyone a reader role, he or she would just be able to access this resource group and check what all components have been created, but cannot modify, add or delete any components within that. Then comes contributor role. A person with a contributor role can add any components similar to how we created key vaults, etc. Correct? Can add, can delete, can update the properties like add tags, etc. of the components. So person with a contributor role can delete, add, modify the components within the resource group. A person with an owner role can do everything that can be done by the contributor role, plus he or she can add others via access control. So the owner of the resource group has everything on top of granting others access or revoking others access from the resource group. So for the second user, from the first user who has the global Azure subscription owner role, grant that second user access to the specific resource group that we created, owner access, and then try to log in via the second account. You would see that post you grant the second user owner access on the resource group, the resource group becomes available to the second user. So, any queries up till now on the concept of hierarchy across component creation and security creation?
Nandan, this also we have to do as part of case study, na? You said the second user which we create without admin access.
Correct.
For
So
that
I'll provide
we have
the
to
case
do
study again. I'll explain the case study again.
that.
Initially log in via your admin account and then create one user. That create first user. The first user, while creating the first user, grant him Fabric administrator and global administrator role. Correct? And then also grant that user owner access in the Azure subscription. Once that is done, open an incognito mode and log in via the new first account that got created. You would be able to see that you are able to see the subscription and you all can create, modify some properties within the Active Directory. for the first user. Now, once you logged in via the first user, the first new user that got created, create a second account by logging in via the first new account. For the second account that you create, do not add any Azure role privilege or Active Directory role privilege, and just create the account. After you create that account, log into an incognito mode and check what all you are able to see. You won't be able to see the subscription, nor you all would be able to make any changes in the Active Directory. After that, from the user account 1, for the user 2, add the global administrator role for that user 2, and then again log in via user 2. You would see that now in the Active Directory, via user 2, you all are able to create applications, etc. But you all still won't be able to see the Azure subscription. This is part 1 of the case study. Then, via account 1, create a resource group. Within that resource group, create an Azure Key Vault and create 2 storage accounts. One storage account with enable hierarchy namespace enabled and another with enable hierarchy namespace disabled. Post creating these 3 components, at the resource group level, grant the owner access to the account 2. Post that, log in to Azure portal via account 2 and you all would be able to see the resource group. But the create a resource group property would be disabled since subscription level role has not been associated to the user 2, but a resource group level role has been associated to user 2. So this should clear your concepts with respect to the hierarchical aspect, difference between Azure role and Active Directory roles. And then finally, invite an external account like your personal accounts or some other office accounts and anything to understand the concept of external user. So invite that external user and accept the invitation of that external user and check the properties in the user aspect. So ensure that these all case studies you all are ready before tomorrow's session at 10 a.m. Any queries on the case study aspect? So